Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Oksana, and this is Education USA for Eurasia and Central Asia. Just to remind you that our advising services are fully virtual, and we provide individual and group advising sessions, undergraduate and graduate application guidance, essay review support, virtual workshops, webinars, and competitive students program. If you are interested in any of our opportunities, please scan the QR code and join our webinars and upcoming events. Today we have some slightly changes in our webinar and our guest, but we will keep the topic. So today we'll talk about how you can choose the best university, the best program that matches you, your academic goals, campus culture preferences, and of course, career aspirations. So the topic is about choosing the right undergraduate university. If you have any questions, please write them in the chat and we'll be happy to answer them at the end of the presentation. And I'm happy to introduce my amazing colleague, Lucy. So Lucy is Education USA advisor, and she will tell us about all the tips and tricks how to choose the right program. Thank you, Lucy, for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be able to talk about choosing the right undergraduate university. So just a little bit about me. So I am a graduate of Harvard College, and I have been an Education USA advisor for the past couple months. So today's topic, as Oksana said, will be about choosing the right undergraduate university for you. So a little bit kind of going beyond the rankings and then talking slightly about the university or the college. So here we go. So when we talk about education in the United States, there are many, many, many different colleges, universities that you can choose from. And so I think oftentimes a lot of people, when they start thinking about where they want to go, look at rankings. And so I think that it's important to maybe take a minute to just talk about like, what are the rankings and why they might not tell the entire complete story all the time. So when we talk about rankings, and especially kind of how universities and colleges are ranked, every single platform will have different ways of kind of how they compile these rankings. But in general, they kind of have these elements. So the first one is the academic reputation. And the academic reputation typically comes from deans and presidents of colleges who are essentially rating the programs of other universities and colleges. And so it ends up becoming a little bit more of kind of like a popularity contest than it is necessarily about the entire student experience. The other thing that they take into consideration typically are graduation and retention rates. And so while these are also very important, many of these sites that kind of do these rankings will talk about the graduation rate in terms of a 6-year as opposed to like a 4-year graduation rate. And as you're likely familiar with, undergraduate duration is typically 4 years for U.S. Undergraduate education. And so when we talk about 6 years, that's another 2 years that you're adding, not only just in terms of your time, but also in terms of money and paying. And so while these graduation rates are like very important, they might not be telling the whole story kind of as they're being factored into the rankings. Retention rates, these just mean the number of students who remain at the university after their first year. And again, important because it can be like an indication of the quality, but might not always be telling the entire full story kind of how student satisfaction is playing into these rankings. The other thing that rankings typically look at are faculty resources and the levels of education. So in terms of the levels of education, a lot of the time schools that have more professors who have PhDs, so doctorate degrees, will be ranked more highly. But just simply having a higher degree of education is not necessarily going to correlate with the highest level of teaching. And so again, it's something that is good to consider, because you want to learn from people who are at the top of their field, who have the proper requisites to be teaching. But again, it's not really telling you kind of the full picture. The other thing that kind of factors into this, the faculty, are the student to faculty ratio. So this tells you the number of students for every single professor. And so if you have a larger student to faculty ratio, it might mean that you will be in classes that tend to be larger versus, a smaller student to faculty ratio means that you might have kind of more intimate contact with those professors who you're learning from. Class sizes too, but again, since class sizes are just averages, it's important, to also take into consideration like what are the largest classes that are being taught, what are the smallest ones, because an average is an average, so you really kind of have to zoom out to see the full big picture in order to get a full understanding of everything. And then the last thing they kind of factor in are faculty salaries, which again, like how that corresponds to like the student experience is a little, ambiguous. And then finally, rankings tend to favor universities and colleges that are more selective. And so, they will be taking students that have like higher SAT, ACT scores, GPAs. But again, just because a school is really selective doesn't necessarily mean that it will be the best school. So I figure that we can take a look at three different websites that do these college rankings, just for you to get a sense a little bit of kind of how they're compiling these rankings, so that when you look at these websites, you kind of have a better idea of what's going on. So the first one that I thought we'd take a look at is from the U.S. News and World Report, because this one I think is one of the first ones that many people will go to. Their annual list of the top 10 universities have a pretty significant weight to them. But when we kind of look at this breakdown, we see that a lot of weight is being put on the research reputation of these universities. And so, this in itself is not necessarily a terrible thing, but again, research is not necessarily the same as the quality of education. And so, if we look, kind of the top two are global research reputation and regional research reputation. So this is how is this university stacking up to the research that other universities from around the world are putting out. There's, another significant weight put on publications, the citation impact. So, how many other universities, how many other professors are using these citations put out by the professors from this university. And so we can kind of see. So there's nothing here really, that's like indicating the student experience. If we look at the QS World University rankings, maybe this one takes into account a little bit more the student experience. So we have the learning experience, which factors 10% into kind of like the total rankings, and then employability and outcomes, which is also very important, because as you're choosing, where you want to study, you want to go somewhere that will help you kind of on your career path, that will allow you to land where you want to land. And then this one also does take into account international students, which since you're applying likely from abroad, is something that you will want to take into consideration. But again, 50% is based on research and discovery. So again, not the full picture. And then finally, we have the Times Higher Education. So 30% of their ranking system is placed on teaching. And you can look further down kind of this list to see how they're breaking that all down. But then 60% essentially is for research and citations. So it's again, very heavy on kind of the research aspect of these universities. And so if we can't, only go by rankings, we'll talk a little bit now about kind of some factors that you really should consider as you're looking at where you want to apply, where you think that you'd be happiest going forward. So one of the, common questions, I think is like, what is the difference between a college and a university? And so a college in the US will typically mean an institution that only focuses on undergraduate studies. And so your undergraduate studies will be your bachelor's degree, which is your first 4-year degree. And universities will tend to have both undergraduate and graduate studies. I say this, but you should also take this with a grain of salt, because there are some There are some institutions such as like Boston College, which are actually more of universities, but just because of the historical name, they've kept the name college like in their title, even though they do offer higher education programs as well, so like master's and doctorate degrees. So a little bit more as you're considering where you want to go, where you want to end up. There are a lot of different types of colleges and universities that you have to choose from. So broadly, kind of all across the United States, you'll encounter this term, the liberal arts colleges. And so liberal arts colleges are kind of the bread and butter of a lot of the undergraduate education system in the US. And so while you're studying at a liberal arts college, you will study from a wide curriculum, that encompasses the humanities, the social sciences, the hard sciences. And rather than kind of having a specific career end goal at the end of your studies, you will come out as kind of a more well-rounded thinker. And so you will have, your major, your specialization, like what you have studied, but you will also kind of come with this whole skill set that will be designed, to help you as you enter the workforce, or if you decide to go for your master's or your PhD. And liberal arts colleges will be kind of your 4-year bachelor's degree. Then the other thing that we have are community colleges. So these are 2-year programs. And instead of a bachelor's degree at the end, you end up with an associate's degree. And if you so wish to pursue your bachelor's degree, a 4-year degree, there are a lot of 2+2 programs. So after you graduate your community college, you can go and attend another institution to finish out those 4 years. Many community colleges too also offer certificate programs for a wide variety of topics. So anything from health to computer science, hospitality, accounting. Actually, in my hometown, which is in Sitka, Alaska, they offer a scuba certificate. So you can become certified in scuba diving from a community college. Then, kind of in slightly similar sense, slightly different, are vocational and technical colleges. And so these are, again, 2-year programs, and these are focused on very career-specific skills. And so you will come out of these programs with a set of skills that you can then directly apply to the job that you wish to pursue. And then finally, we have specialized colleges. And so these are ones like your historically Black universities and colleges, so for students of color primarily. There are also art, music, theater schools, so you can pursue a degree in the arts. And then there are also women's colleges, which are still quite popular. And so they are for people who identify as female primarily. And, so as you're compiling your list, you can start to think about the type of institution specifically that you would like. And so whether you want the liberal arts college, maybe more specialized college, vocational, community college, etc. So then we come to the universities. So in the US, we kind of have 2 main types. So we have public and private universities. So public universities receive government funding, and hence the name public. And these tend to have like a lower sticker price. And the reason being, especially for students who are coming from the state where the public university is located, because they have been paying taxes which have been going to fund the school, they get, in a sense, like a sort of discount from coming in the state. They also, on average, tend to be larger, and just because they're larger, offer a wider range of degree options. And this is kind of, contrasted with private universities, which are funded from endowments, donations, and student tuition. And so these universities, they can have a religious affiliation. Many of them don't, but it's just one thing that public universities are not able to have just because of the separation of church and state in the US. And private universities also tend to have kind of like that higher sticker price. So on paper, they look like they might be more expensive, but they also, because they have these endowments and donations, can have very generous financial aid packages. And so as you're applying, one thing to look out for is how much financial aid these universities will be able to offer. Private universities, some of them, like on average, tend to be slightly smaller than some of the bigger public universities. Again, you will find these public and private universities in all different sizes all across the U.S. And so so it really, depends on where you're going. But since they tend to be slightly smaller, they might have smaller class sizes, which can equate with more personalized attention. So again, it just kind of comes down to like your preference. There are fantastic universities in both the public and the private spheres. So as you kind of start to narrow down your search even more, some things, to kind of to keep in mind. So one of the things that will be the most important to you, since you are going to these universities and colleges to study, is to find the place that will meet you academically where you need to be. So when you're applying, one of the things, I think it probably goes without saying, but I think is worth repeating, is that you should try to meet the minimum requirements for the schools that you're applying to. So as you're researching, look at what the average SAT scores are, your ACT scores, if you choose that way, your TOEFL or IELTS, your GPA, and of course, like if there's a school that like you really dream of going to and maybe you don't meet like one or two of the requirements, of course, like you can still apply, but the majority of the schools that you're applying to, you should meet kind of those minimum requirements. The other thing that you'll want to pay really close attention to are the academic programs that are offered at the college or the university. So going beyond the name of whatever the university, the college is, and researching and making sure that they have the program that you want to study. And then you should also be mindful too that even when you are into a university, there might still be additional requirements for you to pick a specific program. So you might have to apply to the specific major that you wish to study even after you've already been admitted. And so a lot of the times, like if you just kind of go through the university or college websites, they will have all of that information readily available, where you can see what the admissions requirements are like to your specific program after you're already a student at that university or college. Because of kind of the liberal arts structure of many of these undergraduate institutions, another thing to kind of pay attention to are the required courses. So, how many courses will you be required to take in the humanities, in math, and the sciences, all that different stuff. And so if you're someone, who wants to, spend more time kind of like exploring all those classes, you can look at institutions that have kind of a much more flexible, wider option for that versus, if you're more sure that like you want to study something, looking at institutions that maybe you can kind of start to work towards your intended major a little bit faster. And then the other thing that will be probably very important too is the flexibility to change majors. So especially if you're really undecided and don't know what you want to study yet, pay attention, to how easy it is to change majors. For some institutions, it will be quite easy. You'll be able to change. You may have to take, one or two extra courses, but there won't be any, major kind of drawbacks to that. But with others, it may require that you spend like an additional year at the university to catch up on what you need to do in order to make that change happen. And especially considering like the financial restraints and the costs of attending these universities, it's something that can and should really influence the decision that you make. Class size. So if you are a person who really loves, like attending like these big lectures and, being with like a whole bunch of different people, then, maybe look for a university that's on the bigger side that will offer those lectures that have like upwards of 100 people in them. But if you prefer, kind of the more intimate discussions, look for schools, that offer those smaller discussion-based sessions, those smaller discussion-based classes where, it's you with maybe, like 10 other students and a professor. The other thing that we kind of touched on a little bit earlier with kind of, the rankings were the student to faculty ratio. So again, this is, almost directly correlated with the class size. So if you have a larger student to faculty ratio, you'll probably be in some of those larger lecture classes versus the smaller ones if you have a smaller student to faculty ratio. If you're someone who's interested in research opportunities, this is another thing to definitely pay attention to make sure that if you're interested, in studying like cancer or something, that there is a place for you to do that while you're attending the university. The assessment methods of classes can also vary widely. So if you're someone, who doesn't like the stress of having, just like one final end of year exam, where your grades, are based solely on how you do on that one exam, you're going to want to try to find an institution that doesn't have that assessment method. You're going to probably want to find one that is more uh, throughout the course of the semester, where you have different assignments that add up towards your final grade. But that is something to be very aware of, because different universities and colleges will have different ways of assessing you. The other thing that I think you should be aware of as well is the academic year structure. So there are universities and colleges that are on the semester system. So typically that means that you'll start in September, and you'll have the first semester that will end typically in about December, and then the second semester will start in late January, early February, and go until May, April, May. But then there are other ones that are on like a trimester system, and so that means that you'll start a little bit later, and you will have, instead of just the 2 semesters, you'll have 3. And since you start a little bit later, you'll also end a little bit later. So typically the trimester system, you'll end at like the end of June, early July, something like that. And there are pluses and minuses to both of them. With the semester system, typically a course load is about 4 classes, but typically in a trimester system, you'll be looking at more like 2 or 3 classes that you will study more intensely for a shorter period of time. And so again, there's no system that's better. It's all based on like your personal preference. Big versus small institutions, and this will play like a big role in kind of the whole uh, how to say environment kind of like of your academic career. So in bigger institutions, you might have access to more resources solely because there are more people. It's a bigger school, which means that there's just a wider variety of things, but there might be kind of that bigger student to faculty ratio. So you might not be receiving quite as much, like one-on-one attention as you would if you were attending a smaller university, which might not have like the same number of resources, but you might be working more closely kind of with the professors. And so this leads me into the next point, which is classes taught by professors versus graduate students. So a lot of colleges, especially the colleges on the smaller end, will kind of pride themselves on this thing where every single class is taught by the professor. So it's someone who typically has a PhD who is very, very knowledgeable in their subject, versus kind of like these bigger institutions that will have graduate students who kind of act as teaching assistants. And so while the professor may deliver the lecture, the kind of smaller discussion sessions, that come off of the big lecture class will be led by graduate students, so by PhD and master students, so not like professors. And so this is just something to be aware of, again, like as you're making that decision, how you want your academics, how you want to be interacting with your professors. And then the last thing to pay attention to is accreditation of the institutions. So the school should be accredited by a nationally recognized accrediting agency. And this just ensures that the school that you're going to will provide you kind of that quality education, that will provide you with a diploma that will be recognized. And a lot of the times, or most of the time, the status of the institution will be on the webpage. So if you're ever in doubt, have any questions, you can look and see on the webpage where that is. So besides the academic fit, the other thing that you're really going to want to pay attention to are kind of your community and the cultural fit. And so because there are so many different universities and colleges, every single one is going to have a slightly different student life. And so as you're making your list of organizations, of institutions to apply to, start looking into like what student organizations there are. How easy is it for you to, start your own organization? Is there an interest group that is already existing, that you would have an interest in being part of? How easy is it, to become like the director or the president, of an organization, which would look really good on a resume, later? So that's one thing to keep in mind. So Greek life in the US is another big part. So these tend to be clubs, sororities, fraternities where students can live. And for some people that's a huge draw. Like you really want to be part of kind of that sort of atmosphere, but then for others, that's a huge turnoff. And so there are some schools, that pride themselves on having really great Greek life. There are other schools that pride themselves on having no Greek life. And so, that's another thing that you can kind of look into as you're making these decisions. If you're not into Greek life, but you like kind of, different like affinity groups, then you can look for like different cultural organizations. So I know, as an example, like when I was touring different colleges, there were several that I went to where they had, instead of Greek life, they had these like houses that were like affinity houses. So there was one, where it was for people who loved being outdoors. And so if you stayed there, you had to lead like one outdoor expedition per month. There was another one where they always provided the ingredients for chocolate chip cookies. And so if you were in that house, you were responsible for making sure that there was always like a well-stocked cookie jar. So, there are a lot of different things, that you can look into as you're making these decisions. Professional groups are another thing to look into. So especially like if you're interested, I don't know, in like finance or economics or I don't know, like chemistry, anything like that. Looking and seeing if there are these professional groups that, again, will kind of, help you with those next steps. They'll provide you with another thing that you can put on your resume as, kind of like a jumping off point for your professional career. Housing options too will be big. So some universities will require you to live on campus for your first year. And so that means that you will probably be in a dorm, probably have roommates. You might be required to eat like at the dining hall as well. And then some will not. And so you can choose if you want to live on campus or if you want to live off campus. And of course, if you choose to live off campus, being very aware, of kind of what are the housing availabilities like within the immediate vicinity, like what are the costs of those, like is it feasible? Will you have to be living like far away, so you'll have to drive? Is there public transportation available? Anything like that. And then, another thing to look into is if you're someone who really likes to live alone, that might be a little tough, kind of like in these college, university, campus areas. And so if that's a priority for you, then really do your research and make sure that there will be opportunities for you to live alone. If you want to live with roommates, great. You'll probably be able to do that at just about any college, university. And, I think living with roommates is probably one of the things that make up kind of that quintessential like US undergraduate experience. I lived with roommates all 4 years, and it was wonderful. There are ups and downs, but for the most part, you learn life skills, how to live with different people. Another thing to your sports. So different schools, will have different levels of sports. So if you're someone, who really loves to attend kind of like these big like American football games, you might look for a bigger school that has a really strong like team. But maybe you're someone who just likes to play sports. And so looking and seeing like the availability of club sports, so sports where you can just kind of walk onto the team where you play. It's not, like a huge commitment. That might be something else to look into as well. And then if you're just kind of looking for a more complete understanding of campus happenings, I'd highly recommend looking at student-produced newspapers and newsletters. A lot of the times you'll be able to find this online, like if you just, type in the name of the university or college you're looking at and newspaper. And these will probably give you a good idea of kind of the different events that are happening around campus to see if it seems like it would be a good fit for you. Some other practical considerations, so the cost of the university. So tuition, while it is a big part of the cost, is only one part. So you should also be aware that there will be fees. So this, might include a fee for like student activities. Maybe there's another fee if you want to like use the gym, something like that. Another thing to look at is housing, food, and living expenses. So if you're staying on campus, that would include like the dorm, a meal plan, and then anything else like that. But if you're living off campus, really look like where would you be staying? What's the availability of the apartments? How expensive are they? Can you find roommates with whom to share the space? Like, are there grocery stores nearby? Because, there are some parts of the US where grocery stores are few and far between. And so just, keeping an eye out for that. And then the last thing to consider is healthcare. Does the university cover this? Is it included kind of like in the cost of attendance, or will you be responsible for doing that by yourself? Then the other thing to look at is the availability of financial aid. And especially for international students, this is something that you should look into very carefully, because there might be different availability of financial aid for students coming from the US versus students who are coming internationally. And then, of course, there are different types of financial aid. So there's need-based, which is based, off of the financial restraints that you and your family have. Merit-based, which is based on your academic performance. And then the other things that you can look for are work study or on-campus jobs, and then even assistantships. So work study and on-campus jobs, these are, jobs that you would be doing on the university's campus, where you get a small salary in exchange for the work that you're doing. And then assistantships are like where you help to teach a class. And so typically these will, happen a little later in your journey through the university, but they're another thing to be aware of. And then external scholarships as well. So these tend to be on the smaller side, but might come from different organizations. And then the last thing is, just because the US is such a large country, really pay attention to the climate. And so if you're a person, as an example, who hates the cold, then maybe like the north and the northeast is not going to be where you want to go. Maybe you want to go somewhere south where it's going to be warmer, and vice versa. If you don't like, if you can't stand the heat, then maybe looking at some place where the temperatures are a little bit more moderate. And then the urban versus the rural campus. These will, have very, very different feels. If you're in an urban campus, like thinking of just, universities kind of like in New York and Boston, you will be, right in the center of the city, with all the city life, that is going on. And that's one feel, versus a rural campus where, it might feel more like the university is like, by itself. It's a little bit more isolated in that sense, that it feels like when you're at the university, you're really at the university rather than like in the city. Another thing to pay attention to too is the surrounding community. So like, what is the relationship like between the community and the university? Is it a good one? Like are the university students involved in the community that is hosting the college or university, or is it one that's maybe slightly more tense? And then another thing too is just the availability of transportation. So if you're, especially like if you're in one of those rural areas, how can you get to the nearest big city? Because every once in a while you're probably going to want to go, I don't know, on a shopping trip or just to go see like what's around. So how easy is it for you to get from one place to another? So these are all just things, to keep in mind as you're making your list of places where you want to study. And then the other very important thing is the career support and the alumni networks that are offered at your university or college, because this will be, really critical for when you're starting to enter the job market. So like, is there a career support center? What opportunities are available? Will they help you like prepare for interviews? Will they go over your resume and cover letter? Will they, will they have clothes, as an example, to rent for a first time interview if you need something that looks a little bit more professional? What's the alumni network like? Like, are they involved? Are they actively, kind of helping current undergraduate students find opportunities, connecting them with programs, anything like that? And then also, like, what are the career fairs? Like, are there career fairs that come through the university that, offer you a chance to network and to make new connections in the fields that you're interested in? So all these things, kind of help form the network. And so kind of what this means for you. So it is so important that you are happy. So you want to make sure that you choose a university or a college where you will feel at your absolute best, since you are spending 4 years there, which is not an insignificant period of time. And as like you're kind of doing this search, highly recommend that you check out kind of virtual campus fairs or tours. A lot of the times too, there'll be like virtual 3D tours of like the university campus, like on the website. So check those out. See what the university looks like. What does a classroom look like? What's a student dorm look like? Where will you be learning? What are the research facilities like? And then also just don't be afraid to reach out to prospective schools to ask questions that you have. There really are not any bad questions, especially like when you're making such a big decision, such as where you want to go to school. And then the last thing that I'd recommend is that you make a list of the things that are the most important to you. So I know when I was making my list, for me, I really wanted to be close to my mom's side of the family. And so I was looking at schools almost exclusively on the East Coast of the United States. And so that was kind of my number one. And then my number two was the availability kind of these academic programs that I was really interested in, that allowed me to combine history and literature to double major. And then as you think kind of forward to your future, think about which school will realistically help you achieve your future goals. So which school, will provide you with those opportunities that you need, that you want to have, that will connect you with the right alumni, that will connect you with the right programs, that will allow you to build a resume during these 4 years, that will allow you to pursue the career that you want. So that brings me to the end of what I had prepared. So thank you so much for listening to that.
Thank you, Lucy, for sharing such a wonderful presentation. So I think it's time for questions. So dear students, if you have any questions, this is your time to write them in the chat, and we'll be glad to devote a couple of minutes for your final questions. And while we are starting this part of our webinar, I can see already some questions. So I think we can start from the last one that I see. I will also show it on the screen, so it will be easy for you to read. And this question is about like ranking, yeah. So can you give an example where choosing a lower rank institution was subjectively the better decision, and why most students still ignore that?
Yeah. So there are many, many reasons why you might want to choose a lower ranked institution. I mean, like not one, because maybe there's like a professor that you really want to study with. And maybe, that professor is working at a slightly lower ranked institution. But if you get the chance, to really kind of connect with that person, they can really help you on your future career path, and if it is kind of like that lower ranked institution, then it also might give you a chance to really like stand out, especially like if it's something that you're very passionate about. And I think that students might ignore that, just because I think a lot of the times when we think about like universities, like we tend to think of just the ones that everyone knows, like Harvard, Princeton, MIT, Yale, and I think that it kind of has like an outsized impact on how students think about where they want to go to school. But I mean, really, don't count out those lower ranked institutions purely because they're ranked at a lower level.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think also if you're interested in like some clear examples, so it's better to maybe reach out to alumni, look for some people in LinkedIn, let's say, yeah. So and they will be able to provide you more clear explanation and example. But of course, yeah, I agree with Lucy. It depends. Yeah. So like you should take into consideration so many factors if you want to find the best fit for you. Thank you so much, Lucy. Where can I find information on whether the university offers internships?
Yes. So a lot of the time it will be like on the university's website. If not, you can reach out to like the admissions team, and ask just kind of about the availability of internships that they have. But yeah, typically you can find that stuff just online on their web pages.
Yeah, thank you so much. I see that we also had like a couple of questions about financial aid at the universities. So definitely this is the best like decision to go to the university's website and check there, because we can provide only some general information on that. Yeah, but if you're interested in some specific numbers, scholarship aid and so on, it's better to check with the university itself. Thank you so much. Next question I think is about SAT and GPA. So thank you for a great session. Is the SAT actually compensating lower GPA for university, or is it a myth that a lower GPA is already a red flag?
Yeah. So this is another really good question. So It kind of, depends. I think a lot of the times, if your GPA is kind of like on the brink, it's between like what the university is looking for, but maybe just not quite there, and you have a really good SAT score, your really good SAT score might be the thing that like lets the admissions committee accept you. I think if you have like a really, really low GPA, then there might be some questions asked, especially if you've got a really good SAT score, kind of, like, what's going on? Like how did that happen? But yeah, there, as the admissions committee is looking at your application like as a whole, and so these two things are definitely like a big part. But yeah, I think it will probably also just depend, on a case by case basis as well. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think like as you mentioned, it's important to take into account everything together. Like do not rely only on GPA or SAT points, just like or extra activities that you're going to mention, but everything together. This is what is important in your application. Great, thank you so much. And next one is about your experience. Can you talk a little bit about your experience in Harvard College and how was your application? That was your priorities and etc.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Yeah. So, like I said, I was looking for a school that would be really close to my grandparents. And so Harvard was about 45 minutes away by train. And so that made my decision, pretty easy. I ended up applying early action, which meant that I could only apply to Harvard early action. I could only apply to one school early action. But if I was accepted, I was still able to go to a different school. And yeah, so I met that. I think it was in October, the deadline. So I submitted my application in October, and then I had an interview with an alumni in my hometown. He was actually a doctor, and yeah, and I remember, he asked many different questions, that ranged from, like, why do you want to study at Harvard, to if you could teach people in the US one thing, what would it be? And I remember answering the difference between there, and it's, and two. So, so you can, kind of start to think about some of those questions that you might be asked, especially by the alumni interviewers. And then in December, I found out that I had gotten in, and, since it met kind of that number one priority of just being close to family, I decided to attend. And it also had a history and literature combined program, which was something that I was looking for, and that made it very easy for me to pursue my academic goals. So, yeah.
Great, yeah. So like interview is not only about like serious topics, yes. So if you like joke about something, it's also fine. Yeah, like you should like show your personality, I think. Yeah, it's something like a good idea.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. Okay, so where can I find information about reliable student accommodation at the university?
So again, probably the website is going to be like your first stop. If you want, to like really get the nitty gritty, then maybe you can see like if there are any students, maybe like through the Education USA network, who are attending that university, who can maybe give you kind of like the insider's perspective, of like what the housing situation is like, their perspective of it, as a student, because if I can say from experience too with Harvard, like it really runs the gamut, from, having a dorm that's been recently renovated to one, that's still, it's in the process of being renovated, but, you can tell it's kind of, it needs a little bit of work. So yeah, I would recommend website first, and then second, if you have the possibility to talk to students, maybe trying to figure out talking to students about what it's like.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I'm sure also like I think universities should have like a kind of guidebook or handbook for students
Mhm.
like freshmen who are going to come to United States like from different countries, and I'm sure that they will be able to provide you some kind of useful links. So where should you go? What should you do? Where like search different things and so on. Yeah, so don't hesitate, and also ask a university itself, and they will like this is the main point of contact for you when you're already applied. Yeah, great. Thank you so much. So, if they're possible to achieve a full ride for an international student in low-rank university, if there is a possibility, how to raise the chance of achieving what I need to focus on?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this, will kind of come down to the way that you're presenting yourself, like in your application. So really focusing on making sure, that every single part of your application is as polished and shiny and beautiful as you can possibly make it. And that is where, like your wonderful Education USA advisors will come in handy, to kind of really help you present yourself in the best light. Because, in essence, what you're doing is you're trying to um, to make the university, really want to have you come to them. You want to be as attractive to them as possible. And so the way that you do that, of course, is through your application, maybe through the interviews too. And if they really, if you're a very attractive candidate to them, then they'll be more likely to offer you a full ride, a better scholarship. So yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. I also would like to add that if you are from our cohort programs, you can easily reach out to your advisor and maybe ask for advice. Yeah, like what to do, how you should present yourself, like how to write your extra activities in the application form and so on. If not, you can still like use our option and join one-on-one consultation with advisor. So you can scan the QR code and find the information on the website. Yeah, and still you can receive like this guidance on how to raise your chances to be accepted. Great, thank you so much. So another question is, does applying test optional lowers chances of being accepted?
No, it should not. Universities are test optional for a reason. And so if you don't think that your scores are at a level where you'd like them to be, then you can leave them out. But if you do have scores, that are within the range that the university is looking for, then it can't hurt, to put them down. It's really, it comes down to more of a personal preference, but it should not lower your chances of being accepted.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Again, like everything together should be taken into account. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. Next question is again about your experience, Lucy. I think it's pretty interesting question. Did you get any financial aid at Harvard?
My poor parents, no. But Harvard they only offer need-based financial aid. And so what that means is that they don't take into account like academics because they figure that every single student attending Harvard College will be at a level where like you would like reasonably receive some form of merit. Scholarship assistance. And so Harvard meets 100% of demonstrated student financial need, which means that I had many, many friends who were on 50, 75%, 100% financial aid. And Harvard in particular, if your family makes less than 100,000 US dollars or the equivalent a year, everything is covered. They pay for your plane tickets to and from the school, and you even get a small living stipend. So, to kind of cover those personal costs. And if your family makes less than 200,000 US dollars per year, then tuition is fully covered, and the fees and housing and food are like on a case by case basis. So Harvard's a little different, I think, from a lot of the other schools. But yes, that is how Harvard works.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for sharing. Next question, is it possible to pursue a BA in the United States in the field of studies different from the one I got in my country as a bachelor? Is it possible to change the field of studies this way or better choose master?
Uh-huh. So is this like a transfer situation?
I think yeah, it should be like yeah. I think if you are thinking about applying as a bachelor, having a bachelor already in your country, so you should be considered as a transfer student. I think this is like the option here.
Yeah. Yeah, so applying as a transfer student gets tricky really quickly, just because there are a lot more limited options, financial aid, and kind of scholarships. The availability of those goes down pretty quickly as well. So if you already have a bachelor's completed in your country, it would probably be better to apply to a master's program, just for the availability of programs and funding and opportunities that you'll have. I think would probably be my recommendation. I don't know, Oksana, if you have anything.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's always a bit tricky, like when students, like it's a different situation, different countries. Sometimes in one country it's possible to get like thousands of bachelor degrees, but it's a bit different with United States. And yeah, as it was mentioned, if you have already a bachelor degree, so I think the best way is to continue your education and get master degree. If you're thinking about changing your like field of studies, I think it's also like a kind of negotiable question. So you can maybe discuss it with the
Mhm.
university itself, and they could recommend you like anything in this case. But yeah, so I agree with you, Lucy. So I would also recommend to continue and get master's degree. Yeah, thank you so much. So next question is like, I think a bit more general, but it's interesting also. I would like to ask you a question about quantity and quality. Like, is it better if I apply for 20 universities so to have bigger chance, or I should focus on just three, four?
Ooh, okay. All right, good question. So I would recommend, that like you really focus, on kind of like the universities that you definitely see yourself at. And that should probably be a smaller group of about three or four. And make sure that those universities, like are within kind of like the targets that you have, that you are a competitive candidate at those places. If you have the energy and the time, to apply for 20 universities, like, of course, like, there's no harm, I guess, in the sense that, the worst that they can say is no, but it does take a lot of time, energy, sometimes money too, depending on kind of how much the application fees cost. But I think, kind of having that smaller core of like three to four universities that you really, take the time to really truly refine, and make yourself as competitive as a candidate as possible would probably be good.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. Thank you so much. Next question is about SAT and IELTS scores, and this is for you again about your experience. What are the SAT and IELTS score requirements? I think IELTS is like not for you. This is mostly for international students. How about SAT maybe?
Yeah, so SAT, I think, oof, when I applied, I think like the median was like a 1500 something thereabouts, all the way up to 1600. Um, so somewhere in that range, that will make you super competitive. But I think like the lowest, like 25th percentile was like down to like 1400. So it's actually a pretty decent range. They're looking, for diversity like throughout the student body, so students coming from different countries, from different places around the US, recognizing, that students, who don't have access to all of the test prep might not do as well as students, who can spend hours a day in kind of the SAT prep courses. So a relatively big range. And I think actually for the IELTS and the TOEFL, I'm pretty sure that Harvard does not actually require those scores. The last time that I checked, during the we had a November Education USA fair where I presented about Harvard, which is a little interesting, but maybe makes it more attractive. I don't know.
Yeah,
One less
interesting.
test.
Yeah. So anyway, you can always visit the website and check because the requirements might be different. Like the number, we already had several webinars from different universities representative, and they mentioned about different numbers, completely different numbers. So it's better to check with the university itself. Great, thank you so much. I think we have time for just a couple of more questions, and we are done. You mentioned choosing college where I meet the minimum requirements. For colleges that don't have them, what should I look for?
Yeah. So most colleges, will kind of like have like some indicator, of like what they're looking for in their students. And, so if they don't have, kind of like the numerical things that they're looking for, take a look at kind of like the mission statement, of like the college, like what is their community like what is the environment like, and you can kind of tailor your application to make it so that like you meet those values and like have the same kind of, like understanding of like where the university is coming from. And so it's making sure that you're presenting yourself as a good fit. Like you'd be someone who would integrate well into the community of that university, that college. So yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Yeah, great, wonderful. What is the best way to compare two universities if they both seem perfect?
I mean, I think number one would probably be which one is offering you the better financial aid package, I think would probably be my first go-to. If they're offering, comparable ones, maybe look at the cities and, like look at the community. Like, does it look like this community is really fun? Does it seem like, there'd be more things for you to do outside of, just the academics? Uh, uh, yeah, maybe ask students to like reach out to students at both universities, get a sense for kind of what the student body's like, just, to see, and maybe like those subtle differences will start to reveal, one that, rises above the other.
Great, thank you so much. Do the colleges have any regional sports? I heard several answers regarding the questions. Some say that there are limited places for people, for example, from Caucasus region, for example, and others say region doesn't matter. Yeah, like this.
This is a very interesting question, and actually, I don't know the answer. I don't know, Oksana, if you. Um,
Yeah, I
I,
agree with you. I think it's just like based on some university case, maybe. Yeah, sometimes they really have, like not programs, but offers, maybe offers for students for specific region, for students who are applying for a specific program, for like
Mhm.
female students or for male students. But it depends on the university and their like I don't know, like projects, maybe financial options and so on. So you should check with the university itself, I think. But I'm not sure that there is like the thing like this yet. If that university has some sports for different regions, yeah. Like I think it's like it can be a case, like random case, rather than like
Right.
usual, yeah, practice. Yeah. Great. Okay. So I think we have the last question to sum up, and it sounds very nice. If you could go back in time, would you have chosen to attend a top university where the coursework isn't so easy? If so, what keeps you motivated to stay?
Okay. So, like, would I have attended the same university that I attended?
I think, yeah, yeah.
Okay. Um, I think yes. I think one of the most valuable things was just learning from my peers, to be completely honest. Professors were fantastic. I had many, many, many really good relationships with professors, and, had a lot of individual support. I also, had one of the nice things I think about like Harvard College, like when I attended, was that like I was in classes that had like over 100 students, but then I was also in classes where it was just me and the professor. And so I think that uh, that was something that I didn't necessarily know going in, but that definitely kept me motivated to stay. And even when the coursework was like excruciatingly hard, like especially like in those classes where it was just me and the professor, and I there's nowhere to hide, if you didn't prepare well enough, like you did not prepare well enough, so you had to take credit for that. But I think it was challenging in just the right ways for me. And just because it worked for me, that doesn't necessarily mean that it will work for everyone. And so, definitely like, yeah, like take a look at like what the coursework is like. Some universities will even like publish the different courses that are offered. And so sometimes like you can take a look and see like what kind of unique courses are there that are being offered like at this university or this one. So yeah.
Great, wonderful. I think it was amazing, like conclusion of our webinar. Thank you so much, Lucy, for joining us today and for presenting so many things that should be like taken into consideration. Thanks everyone for joining, and thank you for your amazing questions. It's always interesting to answer them and see like what are you interested in. We will be glad to see you during our next webinar. So please don't forget to scan the QR code or find the information on our website and join our upcoming webinars. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Lucy, and see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.